am Dr. Katie Novak, and I am here to help you unpack the new MTSS visual, which is a part of the Massachusetts State MTSS blueprint. And when you're looking at this visual, a lot of the times you're just like, where do I start? And with this blueprint, you're going to start from the outside and you're going to work your way in. Now, all of us probably recognize that structure in the middle, which is the three-tiered structure, where we talk about Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. And the whole focus of an MTSS system is to create the strongest Tier 1 or foundation base possible, so all students can access a Tier 1 instruction in academics, behavior, and social emotional learning that meets their needs. Now, we acknowledge that for some students, they're going to need something in addition to that. We don't want to provide them with Tier 2 or Tier 3 services instead of Tier 1, but we want to make sure that we have a strong Tier 1 so that when we provide them with targeted intervention and support, it will truly allow them all to be able to make great progress and to become future ready. So in Massachusetts, most of our students have very, very strong outcomes, and we're actually leading the nation. The reality is that for some students, they're not making the same growth as their peers, and that is not because students are disabled, but rather because our systems are disabled. And so when you're thinking about that inner structure, that three-tiered structure, I want you to think about a snowman, because a snowman doesn't exist without a really strong foundational base. And so when you're thinking about building a system, you want to first focus on that foundation. You will never intervention your way out of a weak Tier 1 instruction for all students. So in order to do that, you have to make sure that that foundation is truly universally designed and provides equitable access to all students. Universal design for learning is about providing multiple means of engagement, action and expression, and representation in order to eliminate the barriers that prevent some students from being able to be really successful in that Tier 1 environment. And equitable access, if we unpack that term, basically means access means every single student has a seat in the classroom. That is access. Equitable means the kid gets that seat in the classroom regardless of whether they have an IEP, whether they're an English language learner. But to provide equitable access to all students, we do need that Tier 1 to be universally designed. We also need to make sure that Tier 1 is very rich with progress monitoring tools and diagnostic assessments and universal screeners, so we know when students are going to need supplemental targeted intervention and support. So if we zoom out, what you'll see is to make this structure in the middle be effective, we have to actually work from the outside in. Now, with a snowman, it doesn't matter how badly you want to build the snowman, everything in the environment has to be right for it to work. You need to have the right temperature, you need to have the right kind of snow, you need to have the right kind of materials. If you want to make a really big, really impressive snowman, you have to have a bunch of shared responsibility for making it, because you can't just pick up that giant snowman stomach on your own. And so it really is a team effort to create a really great snowman, and there's a lot of environmental factors. Now, in this MTSS blueprint, we call all those factors on the outside drivers. And those drivers are what create a system that allow for the universal design of academics, behavior, and social emotional learning within Tier 1, and also a really robust data culture so we can provide Tier 2 and Tier 3 services in a very flexible way. And so to do that, we have to unpack what those drivers are. Now, if I'm building a snowman, we already talked about, we need some sort of systems implementation drivers, which are things like we need the right kind of weather, we need the right kind of snow. And when we're thinking about teaching and learning, we need the right curriculum. We need the right database decision-making tools. We need the right schedule. We need to have, the right staffing. Those are the environmental factors that a multi-tiered system addresses. Also, we need to have really strong leadership in schools that create shared responsibility and really build a culture that's about meeting the needs of all students. It's about building collective efficacy and working together to make decisions. And the same is true if we want to make our really amazing snowman, is we all have to be on the same page about our vision, about what we need to do moving forward. We have to provide each other with feedback, and we have to make sure that all of us are involved in actually creating a system that works for all. And then the last aspect here is this whole aspect of capacity, building competency and capacity. And that is, how do we actually teach in a way that is universally designed? How do we meet the needs of all learners academically, behaviorally, and socially emotionally? How do we create a system where all educators understand what it means to teach all students. And to do that, we need to focus on our professional development, our teacher induction programs, ed-eval, and also distributed leadership, and talking about things like peer review and pineapple charts and instructional rounds. So again, as I said at the beginning, we're going to build this from the outside in. The first thing we want to do is look at all the drivers and see which ones in our district or school may be barriers that will prevent the really, really rich development of that three-tiered structure in the middle. Once we know that all of those different drivers are in place, we can begin to make really great decisions about how we're going to provide equitable access to all students in universally designed classrooms, academically, behaviorally, and socially emotionally. And when we do that, when Tier 1 truly becomes the least restrictive environment for all students, then we can provide students with more instead of to provide them with the targeted and the intensive support they need until data shows us that they actually can have all their needs met in that Tier 1 classroom with their peers.